And now,
ladies and gentlemen,
please fasten your seatbelts.
Welcome to PreneurCast.
Business cards being swapped, beers being drunk.
Can I say a nasty word? Can I say procrastination?
With Pete Williams and Dom Kocher.
How well did that go down?
We can talk about that entire thing in a very another rant and soapbox episode if we want to.
Visit us online at PreneurMedia.tv.
Dom Goucher.
Oh, you're starting this week. Okay, great, fine.
Well, you said last week that we got to mix it up a little bit and change it, so I thought I would jump in early. Clearly it didn't work.
I had one of my big words ready for it. I'll save it for next week. Never mind.
Oh, interesting. How are you, buddy?
Pretty good. Just because you forgot the kind of formal intro there, Mr. Williams, so I'll just introduce myself. This is Dom Goucher and Mr. Pete Williams. This is PreneurCast.
Absolutely.
Welcome, everybody.
It's good. It's back to you and I this week. We've sort of had a couple of episodes where I've been talking to the rich and famous of the world, I guess, authors. Probably not rich, really, are they? But this week, it's back to you and me.
Yep, excellent. I have a little soapbox topic of my own to talk about this week.
Fantastic.
So, how's your week going?
Yeah, lots going on. Been dabbling in some new projects that I've kind of hinted at in the last few episodes. Hopefully some stuff being released and shared in the next few days almost, which is super exciting. So for those part of the Preneur community on the email list and the newsletter lists, keep an eye out in your inbox for some really cool stuff coming out shortly, which is exciting. Working on some video stuff. I'm part of a video superhero summit, which is kind of cool. So with a whole bunch of other...
folks, you have to look at that, okay? You have to look at this video superhero summit that Pete's in, if only to see the artwork. That's all I'm going to say.
I feel like a bit of a fraud. It should probably be you up there more than me talking about video stuff, mate. But I'll represent us as best I can.
You will do a sterling job, sir. You will do a sterling job.
Very, very cool.
It's an excellent little project you've got going on there. Because I've been a little bit AWOL recently, and I will talk about that a little bit in a minute. But I also, keep an eye out. Do all members of the Preneur community keep an eye out for the new projects? Pete's got some stuff, and I've got some stuff coming along soon as well. It's got a little bit put to the side from recent events, but back on track now. And we've got some great things, just little projects to show you what we've been doing, and anybody in the kind of inner circle will also be able to see behind the scenes of those projects, which is quite exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump into this week's episode, mate.
Okay, so not wanting to go into too much detail about the reasons why, but I had very first-hand experience recently of the dark side of being an expert. Now, this is something that I have been talking about for years and years, even before Pete, even before I met you, when I was a trainer. And we always used to talk about the difficulty and the downside of being a subject matter expert. And it's more obvious when you are a trainer, or you write technical documentation, training documentation, or you try and transfer some knowledge to somebody. As an expert, you tend to skip over the basics. But there's recently it came to light in a really, really solid example of why this is even more vital as a business owner and as somebody talking to a client. As I say, it's obvious in a training environment, but when you're facing a client, you don't maybe see the situation that way. Now, please excuse a very left field example, but it really is quite a stark one. Very recently, I had to deal with a funeral director. Now, a funeral director is one of those things that you hope you never have to deal with yourself. And if you do, you've got no way of having any knowledge or any prior experience, any understanding whatsoever of what is going to happen. And this is really where this is coming from. Because if you're a business owner, let's say you are a tradesperson, which is a good classic thing, and we've talked previously about tradespeople and in the context of the 7 levers. If you're a tradesperson and somebody wants your services, they have some understanding of what it is that you're going to do. If you're a plumber, they've got a rough idea what you're going to do. If you're a builder, they've got a rough idea what you're going to do. So this example of this funeral director really stood out to me, because I walked in there and I literally had no idea. And there was no way I would have an idea. I got no reason in my past to ever know what a funeral director does, what the sequence of events is, or anything. And so the onus was on the business owner, as it were. Strange to say it again in this context, but was on the person representing that business to communicate to me and help me through this process. Now, I have to say, they didn't do a great job. And this is why it really, really stood out. Not only because of the extreme, there's no way I was ever going to know what the process was going to be, but also because of the massive amounts of stress and all those other emotions that you're feeling at the time you have to go through this, that could have been alleviated if this person had communicated a little bit better. Just simple things like what the normal sequence of events might be, what all the options mean, what it means if you do or don't take this option, all these things. Now, again, this is a really extreme example, but it really stood out to me and really resonated with me, because I thought, in certain circumstances, even in a simple business transaction, like with a tradesperson, like a plumber or a builder, you're, as the tradesperson, you're the expert. You have all the knowledge. You do this every day, but the person that's called you in, it may be really, really stressful for them. It may be really difficult for them. They may not have a real understanding of what you're going to do. And this loops back to something, Pete, that you talk about a lot when we talk about the 7 levels of business, about when you put in your proposals and that conversion stage. The more you can communicate with a client, the more that you can help them understand what the process is going to be, and how things are going to happen, and what each part of the process means, or whatever. The more you can build that relationship with that client and make them feel better, not only for the initial conversion, but later on building a relationship. Now, again, I have no reason to have an ongoing relationship, thankfully, with a funeral director, but in a more normal everyday circumstance, this is a really big thing. Not only for that conversion stage, but that ongoing relationship. So, I mean, Pete, I don't know. I mean, I've gone on a little bit about this, but it really, as I say, it's a really extreme example, but it's a really important one where, as a tradesperson, a business owner, somebody communicating with a client, that duty of care is with you to educate your client, to make sure that you're speaking at the right level and that you don't miss things out, so that that client doesn't feel stress or difficulty, or doesn't just get lost with what it is you're trying to get across. I don't know, Pete, if you got, what do you think about that?
No, look, I completely agree. And there's so much in this sort of marketing space that talk about educating before the sale. You want to educate your prospect and have them understand what it is you're offering before they come to meet the salesperson, to make the conversion easier, and all that sort of jazz. And that's very, very important. And we've definitely touched on that in previous episodes here on the PreneurCast. But educating after the sale, educating throughout the implementation, throughout the delivery, is just as important, if not in some circumstances more important, because it's that repeat business that you're after at that stage. You're trying to work on that particular lever, so you want to make sure the experience that the person actually has is what they expect, and you're managing expectations. So there's a lot of things to talk around this, so hopefully I'm not going to go in too many directions, but let me touch on a few things really quickly. Is that managing expectations? That's one of the biggest things that is what controls customers' expectations, customer experience, and whether they're going to refer you or come back themselves. And
that referral actually is a really big thing there, because we talked about the ongoing, but in all cases, whether it's an ongoing or a referral, it's equally important, right?
Absolutely. And it's all about managing expectations. This is something we talk about in our business, in the telco business, so often, is we have to manage not only your staff and your manager's expectations, but the client's expectations. They come into some sort of transaction with an expectation, and you need to be able to manage that. And one of the best ways to manage that is to educate them about what the process is going to be. So something we've been talking about testing inside our telco is almost like a welcome pack. So if someone, agrees to buy a phone system from us, a welcome pack with this is what's going to happen from now on. You're going to get a phone call from one of our technicians to do a data collection. In that data collection, they're going to ask you these questions, so be prepared. Then they're going to come out and do a site inspection and check out your location. Is there going to be cabling required? Is there going to be additional, power points needed? What is required on site to ensure the phone system installation can go smoothly? Then we're going to come out and do the installation. Like, there's obviously a whole bunch of steps that we know internally, because that's just our process. But without the clients being educated about what that process is, they're none the wiser, and they have their own expectation. And if their expectation isn't actually what you're going to deliver, there's going to be a huge disconnect there in satisfaction. So,
that's actually a fantastic example. I love that one, because also that if you've been following along with the 7 levels of business framework that we talk about, all these things are almost already in place internally, aren't they, Pete? Because you say, you said this is your process. This is what your team already are going to do. This is the way they do it every time they do it, because you've documented your processes, right?
Yep.
So all you're actually doing is taking that internal process, flipping it around and showing it to the client in advance.
Yeah, that's all you need to do. And it's not a hard thing, really. If you've got the documentation already done, it's just tweaking a little bit to make it a little bit prettier and nicer and appealing to the client. And that's your welcome pack. And as a really sort of quick sidestep is, if you're doing something technical, as in the delivery of the actual solution that you're selling, then also having a whole bunch of FAQs or these sort of steps in there, it also kind of acts as a protection for you. Because if the client turns around at some point and says, I didn't know that was going to be the case. You didn't tell me that. That's not what I expected. And then they sort of try and, delay payment or ask for additional solution or support or service, whatever it might be. That happens so often in that sort of style of business where you're delivering a service over time. It's not transactional. Then that document can actually help protect you as well as a business owner. So there's actually, some additional auxiliary benefits of having these sort of welcome pack documents when people come along to actually use a service that is delivered over time. Now, in a transactional business, this can still apply. If you look at like the e-com sites that we have, and obviously other sort of transactional places, is you've probably experienced this when you go onto an e-commerce website and you've made a purchase, and obviously there's going to be a delivery of that item at some point in the future. Quite often the very first email you get is an expectation management email, is what sort of I refer to it as. And it just says, thanks for your order, this is what's going to happen now. You'll receive a tracking note in 2 days' time when your goods are dispatched. You should receive that in 4 or 5 days after. If you find a delay, first thing you should do is grab this tracking number, go to this website and track it that way, because it's going to be with a third-party courier company that we can unfortunately not be in control of. So your best place to actually track your goods once you have that tracking number is here. Then, if there's a refund issue, go here. So you're basically setting out the expectations and setting that context as soon as the transaction is made, because it will actually give that customer peace of mind. It will have their expectations on the same page of what you're going to deliver, which obviously helps that customer satisfaction, and also it can potentially help you as a business owner and your team reduce the amount of resources that are needed to support silly or stupid questions.
Yeah, I mean, just to bring this back to the kind of the opening point that I made about the downside of expert knowledge. Those two things you talked about there are absolute classics of things that people do every day, but they don't think to tell somebody that's what's going to happen in advance.
Perfect.
And it's a huge disconnect between a service provider or any kind of business and the customer. And if you can bridge that gap just by thinking it through, and it can be as simple as, it really doesn't have to be like step by step, granular detail. It can be as simple as, and this is an example I think we talked about when we were talking about the 7 levels of business applied to tradies. It can be as simple as just elaborating and explaining to people that your process includes laying down dust sheets, for example. And it's, by comparison, okay, this is, again, you can't get further apart, but in the same space of time, I've had to go through dealing with the funeral directors and a number of kind of local government agencies registering a death, etc., etc. None of which went well. All of which were examples of people knowing what they were doing, but not telling me, and putting me under an awful lot of stress. And on the flip side, at almost exactly the same time, I was dealing with a local tradesman who was a painter and decorator. And just literally poles apart, but the way that these two kind of groups of people dealt with it, again, was poles apart. I said to the guy, the guy turned up, and the first thing he said to me, I said, hey, I've never had any painting or decorating done, so it was an equally level playing field in the two circumstances. But the guy came in and he said, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do in terms of the actual understanding the painting and the decorating part. He said, and the first thing I will do is I will lay down I will cover the carpets, I will tape up this, I will prepare the paintwork, I will, and so on and so on. And he literally talked me through everything that he was going to do. Not in the ultimate finite detail, but just in enough detail that two things happened. One, basically every question I could possibly have thought of up front, like, oh crikey, is he going to get paint on the carpet, things like that. So this is your FAQ example that you gave there. All those were answered. But another very interesting thing happened, and I didn't realize it until after the fact, was he was not on purpose, but he had subconsciously justified his price. Because he was explaining to me that he wasn't just going to come in with a tin of paint and a brush and slap paint on the doors.
Yeah.
He was describing the process, describing the detail, the quality, the level of care he was going to take, and the steps it took to do the job.
Yeah.
Not making a big deal out of it, but just by simply stepping me through that, I felt I was getting value.
Now, on that point, let me ask you a question, Dom. Did you find, and in hindsight now, thinking back on it, that some stuff he said he was going to do that initially impressed you and thought, this guy obviously is unique, is worth the money, is all those various terms, but in hindsight you realise it's probably stuff that every painter actually does, I just didn't realise it until after the fact?
Well, it was about 50-50. I mean, as I said, some of the things he said were answered questions I'd already got in my head, like, are you going to put down drop cloths? How are you going to cover things up? That kind of stuff. And that I expected or wanted to hear. But the parts of the process that I wasn't aware of, like, he had to prepare the paintwork or prepare the doors, as they were in this case. He had to prepare them before he could paint. There was a extra step to the process that, as a non-expert, it was valuable to me to be aware of. But yes, I would hope that every professional painter and decorator would go through those steps. Yeah. And so that's, again, stood out to me that I'm sure they all do it, but he pointed it out to me that he was going to do it. Well, this
just reminds me of the Schultz beer story, which probably some listeners are probably familiar with. That's back from the early 1900s. When Claude Hopkins, I'm pretty sure it was, the copyrighter advertising person at the time, he was assigned to do some advertising and marketing of Schlitz beer, I'm pretty sure it was in memory. And all he did, to sort of make a long story short, when he actually was doing the campaign to market the beer, was he just actually went out and advertised the process that Schlitz beer used to make the beer. Things like, we wash every bottle 3 times. We take the best hops and we do A, B, and C with it. And the actual company directors at the time were like, yeah, but that's nothing unique. We don't do anything unique with our beer. That is just the normal process of making beer. And, what he turned around to them and said was, well, does your customer know that? Do they understand that? And he took Schutz's beer from, I think, 9th in America to number 1 or 2 or 3, like really high up, just by making a campaign, educating the actual audience and the customer base about the process, even if it was just normal. And, the point in that is that, your customers are naive. They're, coming to you as an expert because they can't do it themselves. So even telling them about the basic, normal process steps that you're going to do that everyone else does will quite often lead to some aha moments to your prospect and to your client that makes you look better than everybody else because they weren't even aware that is a standard feature. So communicating the basic stuff you're going to do is actually a good marketing tactic in its own right to increase customer satisfaction, impress and, go beyond customer expectations, and also then, help build that or plant that seed of repeat or referral business.
Absolutely. I mean, just to kind of in the middle of all this, just to bring it all together, and just to kind of highlight the key points that we're trying to get across, because as I opened with, I gave a pretty extreme example that might have made people miss a few steps in their run this week, or drop the dog lead or whatever. But what we're talking about here is the fact that whether you feel that what you do is unique or complicated or challenging or not isn't the issue. And this is also an ongoing message that I will roll out time and time again. You are not your client. And Pete, you used a word there which was naive, but you used it in the proper sense of the word, in that they genuinely don't know. They genuinely don't have any experience or knowledge, and they are looking to you as an expert. And you might be a plumber, a builder, a painter and decorator, and you might feel that you're good, competent, or, very positive. You might feel very positively about your work, but you might not think of yourself as an expert, but you are to your client. Mm-hmm. You're called in and you're asked to do your best. But there's this situation, and the key points here are, first of all, that you've got this naive client situation. You need to educate them just to make them feel better. Just to kind of, just to make them feel better, just to make them like you, to kind of build that rapport. And this can be a pre-sale thing. Yep. Or it can be during the operations, and it could be post-sale. It can be all the way through that transaction. This idea that you can make people feel better. But then, Pete, your example of heading problems off at the pass, informing them in advance to avoid questions. If what you do is standard, especially if it's in a computerized system, your e-commerce example was great, Pete. One of my favorite online examples is Moo Cards. Mm-hmm. A digital printing company. It prints really excellent cards and other promotional materials, and they have exactly the process you described. An automated system which follows the same steps, it's a computer, not a human, mails you out, steps you through, draws graphics and shows you pictures and talks to you in a very human way about what's going to happen next. So you don't have these questions because so you're heading these questions off, and then that final thing again, Pete, from your example of just being clear, almost, it's like an informal contract, really. Mm-hmm. If you're clear with your client about this is what's going to happen, you're avoiding the problem of, I was expecting this, or I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, and I think any business owner who's had that conversation with a client more than 3 times knows how frustrating and annoying that actually is, because you've followed your process, but just the client's expectations are at the other end of the football field, and that doesn't help.
Yeah, so those are kind of the 3 things. There are different parts of the process and different things involved in it, but all of it comes down to the same thing, which is that you are the expert. But there is a downside to being the expert, which is that you can overlook this basic knowledge transfer. And I think I just like to pull out an example from something that you were talking about, Pete, because I really do. I think it's fabulous, and it's a great example. It's something that I do in some of my businesses, and it was just in the middle of a sentence. You just whizzed past, and I just want to pull it out because it's a great example. And again, back to my recent problem, the exact opposite happened to me. You said that one of the things you say is, someone will call you and ask you these questions, so have the answers ready.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Now, that is actually a fabulous thing you can do for anybody, is to tell them up front, I'm going to need this from you.
Yep.
I'm going to ask you these questions. If you call us if you call us for a reason, have this. You'll see it sometimes. You do see it on government forms and official communications. It's very subtle. It says our reference.
Yep.
Yeah, they'll give you a reference number, but sometimes they actually will write out, if you call us, have this number ready. We're going to ask you for it.
Mm.
You know, and it's a tiny difference, but it makes a huge difference to the person when they call. I don't know if you've ever, Pete, you probably don't have this, but I've certainly had it recently where I've gone through that process. I've had to ring a complete stranger. I've had to ring a government agency I've never dealt with, no idea, no reason to ever have called them before, and I ring them up, and the lady asks me, "Can you tell me this?" And because the letter that I'd got said, "When you call us, have this ready. We will ask you." I could very easily and happily just say, yes, it's this. My tension was lowered.
Mm.
Yeah? It got the process off to an easy start. And it's a simple little thing. You know, I'm going to, at some point during the project, it could be anything. It could be, and this is relevant to a project that I'm working on at the moment that we'll be talking about soon. But, when you're building a website for somebody, and this might be the topic of one of our little If I Was A episodes one week, but if you're building a website for somebody, if that's your business, there's going to be some standard things that you're going to want. You're going to want their logo in a particular format, maybe. You're going to want the name of the company. You might want a secondary tagline or description. Mm-hmm. You may want artwork for a product. And all these things might be in a certain format and a certain size. Now, if you do this you do this about 5 times a week, if you write all that down and have it maybe in a lovely formatted PDF or a standard email, maybe using, that you could maybe fill out quickly using one of our super tools like Text Expander.
Yep.
Where you just type a couple of keys and the program actually fills it out for you. There's things like that on Windows as well as on Mac, but Text Expander is a Mac thing. Whatever it is, however you have it, even if it's a piece of paper that's printed out that you stick in an envelope and post to your client, you're helping them get started. You're getting them over that hurdle. And you come across, every time you do this, the difference, literally to me, on the one side, I had the funeral director in the local government agencies, and I felt stressed, I felt agitated, I felt unsupported, I also felt stupid. And I don't know about you, Pete, but I personally wouldn't class myself as in the lower intelligence group.
Not at all, man.
Under any circumstances, but I felt stupid. Because I didn't know what was going to happen next. I didn't have the answers. I didn't have the questions or anything. And so that caused me a lot of stress. Whereas on the other side, just having that knowledge, having that reference number and knowing I was going to be asked for it, knowing what the painter and decorator was going to do, those people made me feel happy. They made my life easier on that day. And I was going through a lot of stuff, and it can often be just that little tiny thing that you do where you think a little bit in front, a little bit more about your client and what they're going to be going through, and you help them that one extra step, and it makes a huge difference to them.
So something that popped up as you were saying that to me, which is that I don't know how obviously relevant this is. This is maybe a bit of a long bridge I'm building, but if you're in a business where you have a lot of clients who agree to something, then don't follow through. So you may be sort of selling some sort of service or solution that needs clients to actually be involved once they give you the green light. There's some businesses we've been involved in over the years that have that sort of, requirement. Someone signs up, then they have to actually be involved in the process of delivery. And quite often, it's quite hard to get people to stick through that delivery process, and you still have a lot of slippage where people actually sign up but don't fulfill the end solution, so you can't actually charge them anything. And
very common in web design.
Absolutely, yeah, perfect example there. And something that you just mentioned that, about you felt stupid is that, well, hang on. If you think about it, most people's reaction when they feel stupid or overwhelmed, something like, is fight or flight. So you'll get some clients who get really agitated and, really voice their opinions, and you deal with the squeaky wheel and you deliver their solution. But there's going to be some people who will actually feel intimidated or stupid because they don't understand the process. So what will they do? They'll just ignore the whole process altogether and go somewhere else. So if you're in that sort of industry where you are finding people don't always follow through as a client on their own promises and their own sort of commitment and consistency when they say, yes, we'll do this, and don't follow through, it's probably because they're embarrassed or feel stupid quite a good percentage of the time. So
that is an excellent point.
So if you can actually do this sort of pre-education process at the start of the actual delivery or implementation, whatever it is, of the service you're offering, you'll actually help make that client more educated, feel smarter, more involved, will actually help you increase your stick rate, so to speak. So it's a very subtle thing that people don't probably think about, but it's actually a very good stick strategy as that process. I know in sort of information courses, I know one of the things that they suggest you do quite a bit is if you have a very large course that you're delivering to your customer in terms of education and you're overwhelming them with a lot of information, one of the first things you want to do is give them a bit of a how to go through this course guide. The very first thing they're meant to read and consume is, hey, this course is huge. This is where you should start. This is how you should actually tackle this course, because if you tackle it any other way, you're going to feel overwhelmed, you're going to feel distracted, confused, stupid, and you're going to ask for a refund, which is not good for anybody. So this is the best way to actually consume this course, consume this content. So if you're in that information marketing game, having that welcome document of how to actually go about consuming the education on the course and all that sort of stuff can actually help reduce your refund rates, which obviously is improving your stick rate.
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes you say this is going to be a long bridge, and I think you're right. But that's actually right. But that's right on the money. Absolutely right on the money. It's another example of, you spend however long it is where you've designed this training course, and if it's like the material, the kind of material that I produce, that my company produces, that is, online based, video based delivery, maybe PDFs and transcripts and things along with it, or audio or whatever, but it's not something that's delivered one to one. You're not getting that direct feedback from your client. Then you do need that extra step. You need, again, it's an example of what I was just saying, of thinking through what they're going to go through. And yeah, they're going to look at this huge pile of stuff, and you might get them thinking, I'll go through it linearly, but they may just look at it and go, and yeah, you'll get a refund. And it's, again, a tiny little thing. Maybe spend 2 minutes or 5 minutes extra out of the whole time you've spent building this training course. Spend 5 extra minutes, record a little video. It doesn't have to be special or anything, or a little audio, or write a PDF or whatever it is that just says, start here, do this. And maybe even don't feel bad if, don't try and do X, don't feel bad if Y, whatever, this is how we advise you to go through it, etc., etc. Just reach out to them, just give them a little helping hand. Because, yeah, as you say, it's a great frame for that, but it is that fight or flight thing. the two things you experience, especially, the closer you are to the client, is the fight or flight. You'll either experience the running away, which I think you really identify very well there, this idea that people feel stupid, don't know the answers to the questions, can't deliver on their part, so they run away, they hide. But the other thing that you kind of talked about earlier is this fight, this thing where if they feel stupid, they feel that they weren't informed, then it becomes a fight. Literally, they will start arguing with you. They'll start arguing about the invoice. They'll start saying you didn't deliver what you said you were going to, or you did something you didn't say and you're charging them for it. And all these things that I'm sure a lot of people have experienced in the past. Mm. So it's a good, actually, that fight or flight is another good way to look at it. And it's all about this communication. It's all about stepping back from your knowledge and realizing that you are an expert to the real, out in the real world, to the everyday customer, and that you can help them with your knowledge. You can help them achieve their goals, and it applies in so many examples. And hopefully, my two extremes of the funeral director and the painter and decorator have really shown that in this little conversation.
Yeah. So let's get tactical really, really quickly before we wrap up this episode, if you don't mind, Dom. I want to talk about...
Cool. No, love it.
And talk about some tactics and ways people can actually build this education into their business and their process. So, one great way is obviously just grab your iPhone and do an FAQ type video just in front of you. Go, hey guys, thanks for taking on our plumbing services, our educational course, whatever it might be. This is what's going to happen from now on in. And just talk to the camera for 4 or 5 minutes and explain the process. That's one very granular, very easy way to actually have that done. Upload it to Vimeo or YouTube and embed it on your website. And then when people transact, send them the link. Very, very easily to go, hey, check out this video. I'll walk you through and talk you through the process of what happens next. It's the what happens next video. That's definitely one way of doing it. To create this, documentation, if you want to do it as a PDF type document, think of something like Screen Steps, a tool we've spoken about numerous times on the show, which I absolutely love, where you can actually create documentation. It's exactly what it's designed to do. Step 1, here it is. Step 2, here it is. So you could either take photos of the process and embed photos extremely easily into the actual Screen Steps documentation, or you can, if it's a web-based online service you offer, do those Screen Steps. If you have an e-commerce store, write that welcome email. Look at what email gets sent out as a receipt or at the end of a transaction and tweak that with, these are the next 4 things that are going to happen. Refund policy process, delivery, tracking. What are some of the headaches you actually get, and how can you, communicate those early on to alleviate those headaches later on in the process? Dom, what other sort of things can you think of tactically that you could put in place to actually get this result we're talking about on today's episode?
I just think it's. I mean, you gave some great examples there. The what's going to happen next, video or audio using your iPhone or smartphone or whatever, and using software, clever software like Screen Steps. If the steps, the process of going through, walking somebody through a process needs that kind of complexity, but to me, it is just about, what do you do? If you do nothing else, sit down and think about and what happens next. I think is probably the best thing, is to sit down with a piece of paper and say to yourself, what happens next, and write it down, and then that's what you send in whatever format works. Whether it's written, whether you say it to the person if they're on the phone, whether you make a video or an audio, whether you PDF, have a diagram drawn, whatever it is the most important thing for me is that what happens next. After that, there's lots of other opportunities that we've talked about, like your FAQ, frequently asked questions, which you will see on people's websites, but you could also have it as a printed out thing that you put in with your quotes, for example. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you post quotes out to people, or you hand deliver quotes, you could have your FAQ, what happens next, written out in there. But to me, it is that what happens next, or what does an XYZ normally look like? You know, for me, and I'll just come back to my extreme example again. All right, because this really, hopefully, will highlight to people that if you're a painter and decorator or you're a plumber, you think it's an everyday trade. But you could have somebody feel the same way that I did with my funeral director, because I actually got to the day before the funeral and I said, I had to ring them up and say to them, can you tell me what actually happens during a funeral?
And they obviously have this, because they do it, 3 times a day, they have this expectation that everyone knows what it is because that's their worldview. And the thing is that, your worldview, your client's worldview, you as a client and your worldview is often completely different, and you need to actually manage their expectation.
That's absolutely probably the best summary I could have given if I'd have scripted it. And that it is. It's about, we might call it a frame, but I think worldview is a really good way of saying it. And that's it. It's the difference between your worldview and your client's worldview. The thing that you do every day, 3 times a day or whatever it is that you do or sell or whatever your business is, whatever a normal day is for you, it's absolutely not going to be normal for your client. Anything that you can do, whether it's frequently asked questions that you write out or this is what normally happens in these circumstances, whatever it is, anything that you can do to bridge that gap so that your client doesn't feel that you being an expert is a bad thing.
Yep. So on that note, shall we wrap up this little episode with a nice little bow and catch everyone next week for another edition of PreneurCast?
Absolutely. And as always, folks, we really do value your feedback, especially on the slightly off-the-wall topics like this week's. Drop us a line. Visit us at PreneurMedia.tv, where you can get all of the replays and transcripts for all of our shows, and you can download them. You can always reach us on iTunes and leave us a comment there. We love those comments. Or send us an email to PreneurCast at PreneurGroup.com. And with that said, thanks to everyone for listening, and we'll see you all soon.
See you guys then.
You've been enjoying another fine episode of PreneurCast with Pete Williams and Dom Gocher. Make sure to hang out with the boys online at PreneurMedia.tv or drop them a line via PreneurCast at PreneurGroup.com.